We've come to expect so much from Sony that it's only natural for us to have really high expectations. And when the Sony A6400 was released, a lot of people were kind of disappointed, and I couldn't help but think of my favorite basketball media personality, Jalen Rose, who says that happiness is a function of expectations. Hey, my name is Mitchell. If you're new to my channel, I make videos about the tech I use, things like cell phones, tablets, and drones. So the A6400 was recently released, and a lot of people were kind of confused by it because we are expecting a Sony A7000, which I've done videos about, and I'll have a link to that up here. But the A6400 is releasing with 4K 30 hybrid log gamma, the Sony A9 focusing system, along with variable IAF as well as animal IAF. It's coming with a fully flipping screen that is going to be totally blocked if you use a shotgun microphone, and there is no IBIS. I think the A6400 is actually going to be a pretty phenomenal camera, and here is why. Now, if we had compared Sony to Nikon and Canon even 3 or 4 years ago, you would have been laughed at because Nikon and Canon are the industry leaders. Everyone uses their DSLRs, and if you are looking for an entry level or a secondary camera because you enjoyed still photography, you would probably be pushed to something like a Canon 80D, maybe a Nikon D500 if you liked photographing sports. And for the longest time, we had incremental upgrades to camera's autofocus system. We had incremental upgrades to the video capabilities, and cameras like the Nikon D7500 were released, and it's kind of like this mid-level $1,000 and DSLR kind of market was kind of fading out. So if you had even mentioned Sony in the same breath as Nikon or Canon, you probably would have been laughed at a few years ago. But now we are expecting so much from Sony that when Sony releases their APS-C kind of mid-level camera at right under $1,000 and it doesn't have 4K 60, people are really disappointed. Meanwhile, Canon doesn't have a camera under $1,000 that will shoot a Super 35 4K image. Nikon's video offerings are, to be frank, pretty bad for anything with autofocus. And Sony went ahead and gave us a camera with a phenomenal autofocus system, a fully articulating screen that will be blocked by the microphone, and they gave us a really good stills camera without IBIS. And people are complaining, why isn't there in-body stabilization for this? We don't have in-body image stabilization for any of Canon's APS-C mirrorless cameras. We don't have anything from Nikon with in-body image stabilization and an APS-C sensor. And Fuji's really, really great X-T3 doesn't have in-body image stabilization. So the idea that people are disappointed because of the lack of IBIS is just kind of a moot point. The only reason why people are disappointed by the A6400 is because the expectations for it are so high. I think that for under $1,000, this would be a great camera for someone like myself who will probably end up getting the new Sony A7000 and want another camera as a B camera or a studio camera, because I can put this on a tripod and rely on its excellent autofocus to go ahead and make sure that all my YouTube videos are crispy and in focus. And I think that for a lot of studio YouTube people, the A6400 would be a great option. I think for a lot of intermediate photographers who want a small camera but want great autofocus, it's going to be a great option. I also think that potentially for wildlife photographers or people that need to capture motion, this camera might be a good option. It does have the older, smaller Sony battery, But the size and weight of this camera, you can't really get a bigger battery without radically changing the design. And Sony is using the same tooling and the same manufacturing that they did for their A6500. And that's how they're able to pack so much value into something at such a low price. If Sony was going to go ahead and engineer a body specifically for the A6400, they would have to obviously add cost for R&D for that stuff. So the fact that Sony is using technology and using body design that's already in place just kind of reaffirms that they're giving you a premier feature in regards to the burst rate and the autofocus capabilities in a cheap camera. Because compared to even something like a Nikon D4 or at this point a Nikon D5 or a Canon 1DX for capturing stills motion, we're going to get similar performance from an under $1,000 camera that we would from a professional DSLR. So you have to cut corners somewhere, and that's how Sony's decided to do that. In regards to who this camera is for, I think this would be a great camera for people that are looking to get their second camera, or people who want to shoot sports. I think this would be a great option. You could go ahead and lower the frames per second down to something more reasonable, like 7 or 8 frames a second, and with the 40 image compressed raw buffer, you would get 5 to 5.5 seconds of motion that you could capture, and I think that's a pretty good value. I think that the next camera that we're going to see from Sony that's going to be a little bit closer to $2,000 and still APS-C size is going to be the more interesting A7000, and that will probably be my next camera. But I'm going to wrap this video up here. It's been me blabbering enough. I just wanted to talk about my feelings about a new product and kind of what I think about it. Until next time, it's been Mitchell coming to you from Hanoi. Peace.